Thank you for joining us, everyone, for another episode of Live by Heart
Today
with your hosts, Dawn Spiegelberg and Wendy R. Wolf.
Hello, and welcome to the Live by Heart Today show number 18. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the new world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science, a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and a lot about transformation. Today's theme is committing to self-mastery, and it's another show in our relationship series. With me for today's Heart to Heart is my co-host, Wendy R. Wolf, professional transformation facilitator. Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Dawn. I'm pretty excited about today's conversation about committing to self-mastery, and I believe it's very relevant to the changes many of us are experiencing in our larger world and in ourselves. So this is a really exciting opportunity to make it really real for us today.
And we are asking for our guest, Frank Forte, to return to this show. He's an executive coach and author of the book, Agile Mindset Demystified. We're so happy to have Frank back, and we're going to be talking about committing to self-mastery. And he's got lots of examples from his life and how and why he was able to make commitments that resulted in his own self-mastery. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, Wendy. Great to be back with you.
Yes, thank you for coming back. So I want to just jump right in. Last time you talked about something that I really want to dig in more, which is going from external motivation in the Navy to learning internal motivation when you got out. And can you speak to us about that?
Yeah, it was probably the hardest thing I had to do in the transition. Literally coming out of the Navy, I had a job the next day, and I doubled my salary. So you would think, oh, okay, everything's awesome, right? To be clear, you don't get paid a lot in the Navy, so it may not be that impressive, Wendy. But having done that, I thought, oh, this is cool. This is good. I can give more, provide for my family, but there was something lacking. There was no validation, and I remember, maybe 6 months into my new job, I'll never forget Joe Morgan. He was a former Marine, and he was kind of crusty. And I went up to Joe and I said, Joe, why do they keep giving me all the work? And Joe looked at me and said, well, when you got a good horse, you ride it. And that was the most validation I got, I think, in the first year I was out of the military. But then I started, education became more important. I thought maybe that would give me that external validation. Certifications, I got some certifications. I did a lot with youth groups, programs like Royal Rangers, and that gave me some certifications. But it wasn't really getting what I had in the military. So, I started reflecting on that and started realizing that I had to, basically validate myself, make choices that I was comfortable with, and then follow through on those, which I had learned those skills in the military in a different context. Follow through on.
I'm sorry. Let me ask you a question, Frank. When you first got out of the military, you were looking for external validation in the same form that you were getting it from the military?
Yeah.
So it was an external source of your internal intrinsic value. Is that true?
Yeah.
Ah, I see. And so when you were out of the Navy, you were no longer getting those external validators for who you were and the good work that you were doing.
Correct.
Thank you.
It's really funny, because to hear you, it sounds like you got very strong, you're off track, information and very strong you're on track information, which really helped you stay on track.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's part of it. It was kind of a mixed message as I was interpreting it, because the leaders, the people in charge, you know, the captain of the submarine or whoever, those people didn't exist. There were no uniforms anymore. I didn't know what the pecking order was. And that's really been part of my consulting life is I operate on influence. And that's all, right? I've led 100-person teams, you know, 50-person teams. None of them technically worked for me. I had to learn influence.
Yeah.
Not persuasion, influence. And people don't care what you know until you check off 3 boxes: know, like, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So if you cannot check off those 3 boxes in another human, I could be the smartest guy on the earth and they won't care.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all about building rapport, right? And so I'm a student of John Maxwell. I'm a certified John Maxwell coach. And if you're not familiar with him, he's written over 40 books on leadership. If you go on Amazon, you know, he's got over 40 books. And
I love his little book series.
Yes, he's got these little tiny books that you can digest them very quickly. I'm certified to teach his programs, and he says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so it's tying it back to, okay, how do we lead? How do we influence people? And I had to learn that because I could tell people, I could give orders, and I'll just bust a myth. I literally, in my Navy career, I probably gave 3 orders in my entire career. That is not how you get things done. So, you know, again, I've given a few when people were really off track, and I knew that I had to get them on track or bad things were going to happen. I'll give you a quick example. There was a young sailor. He kept showing up late, and probably the worst thing you can do is show up late in the Navy. There's actually regulations. You can get in a lot of trouble. And so I said, hey, show up one more time. You're going to be living on the submarine for a couple weeks. And he said, you can't make me do that. I said, well, it's either that or you go see the captain and he's going to take money out of your paycheck. I know you can't afford that because you have small children. So job one, and I actually talked to his wife. I said, he's got to show up on time because they were carpooling and, you know, the kids didn't get ready on time. And right, these sound like a lot of excuses to me. Right. My standard, you know, Dawn, we talked about standards last time. My standard was you were here on time or else you sleep here so I can come help you be here on time. Right. It wasn't out of malice that I was doing this. I was trying to keep this guy from losing part of his paycheck and putting his family at risk, you know, not having enough food or diapers or whatever.
So you were helping, you weren't hindering. And a lot of people would see that as a hindrance, that you were getting in the way of his success when actually you were helping him with his success. I think that's a confusion.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people come into our lives and we think, oh, that's pain or that's suffering. It's correction.
Yes. So with regard to correction, right, that's it. That's an external perception. And I'd love us to talk about those external things that show us what's happening internally so that we can really understand how it was you made that transition from being in the Navy and having so much external validation, right, and external circumstances that were guiding you and moving you forward, and then you didn't have them at all. They were all stripped away.
Yeah, and I think part of the biggest challenge was it happened literally overnight.
Mm.
right? So I was not prepared. And I think part of it is that we have to have a vision for ourselves. We have to have purpose for ourselves. And I lacked that at that time. I given myself fully to the military, to the Navy, to submarines. And unfortunately, for all the right reasons, I had two small children. I had spent 360 days out of the year away from them. And, talk about the divorce rate. I'll tell you a quick story, how arduous it is on a submarine. So I was the guy on the periscope when we would be pulling into port, and people would ring me up on the phone and say, "Hey, do you see my wife? Do you see my wife? Do you see my wife?" One of two things either happened. I saw their wife, their spouse, wife in this case, because all men on submarine at that point, or I saw a guy in a suit. The guy in the suit was an attorney serving divorce papers.
Oh.
The divorce rate on submarines is about 50%.
Heartbreaking.
So the sacrifices those men make is significant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So I'd like to, can I turn the conversation back? I'd like to talk about vision and purpose. How did you find your vision and purpose? And how did you know it was the one? How did you stay committed to that, considering you had to make it yourself?
I made several mistakes. I figured out what it wasn't. I guess would be the first way I would answer that.
Right.
So I thought I would be a technology leader. So in the technology realm, we talk about people, process, and technology. So I'm a computer scientist. I have a software engineering degree. That's kind of what I did after the military. So I thought, okay, I'll be a technology expert. And I did software engineering for about 10 years, and then I figured out I did not have the personality for it. I like people. But I didn't go right to people. I went to the process side. So I became a project manager. I did Lean Six Sigma. I did process improvement type stuff. And I did that for about 10 years. And that, again, left me kind of flat. But then when I started dealing more directly with people and leadership, that's what energized me. And I've always been a mentor. And in the Navy, they teach you to mentor everybody that works for you. So it's part of the DNA, right? High-performing teams is part of the DNA of a submarine. That is where I learned about high-performing teams. And I still use those same principles. And in my book, I talk about those same principles because they haven't changed. They haven't changed in 30 years of creating high-performing teams.
Because people haven't changed in 30 years or more.
Right. I mean, literally, we still have the same fears.
Yes.
We still have the lizard brain, if you will. The brain is so backwards sometimes. We think we're so evolved. But this frontal lobe will shut down in an instant. And we make so many choices before they even get to our frontal lobe.
Yes.
And so we have to be aware of that. We need to shunt it. We need to be present so we can say, is this valid? Is this a valid fear? Is the adrenaline that I'm feeling on purpose? Is it helping me or hurting me? If you're feeling adrenaline in a conference room or a YouTube on a Zoom video, it's probably the wrong thing, right? But if I was on that submarine and I started smelling smoke, guess what? That adrenaline is very useful for me.
Yes. And what's beautiful, Frank, is our theme for today is committing to self-mastery. And so what you're describing is the commitment part. What are you committed to? If you're smelling smoke, your commitment is to find the source of it and take care of it. But if you're in a boardroom and you're anxious, what's your commitment in that boardroom? If it's not clear, then the outcomes may not be optimal.
And it comes back to us being us, right? There's the saying that says, you can't be everybody, be yourself. Everybody else is taken.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we worry about being ourselves. We literally put on personas. We put on other people's clothes.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
In search of finding what fits us. And I had a lot of notes from the session 16, and one of them is we are not our personality.
Ooh, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
That's
because
true.
we're talking about change, and in order to change, I'm stubborn, I'm this, I'm that, I'm OCD, I'm whatever the case may be, right? That is not us. That is a label somebody's put on us, sometimes ourselves. And so, kind of going back to, I had to figure out what my purpose was, what the vision I had, and literally it's taken me quite a while. Now, have I been successful along the way? I'm independent, I'm curious, I'm somewhat adventurous, right? So I was always ready for the next big thing. I've done 2 rotations in Saudi Arabia, one during Desert Storm 1. Why would anybody in their right mind voluntarily go to Saudi Arabia during a war?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's a good question.
I want to know what your answer is. What was your answer for doing that?
It was an opportunity to get out of the job I had, I guess. I was sitting there writing specifications for a missile guidance system, and I was going to be there another 2 years, and I was dying because I never talked to anybody, and I used a lot of math.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you had an opportunity to do what in Saudi Arabia?
Go help people. Go help the military.
Yeah.
So that brotherhood drawl kind of, pulled back. Got dysentery, lost 25 pounds in about 12 days. Great diet. Wouldn't recommend it though.
Yeah.
So, Frank, tell me about your commitment. So it was pretty clear when you're in the Navy, when you're in active, you had, and then when you got out of the military, you were searching for something to be committed to. Is that true?
Yes. And what I ended up landing on is creating high performing teams. And then that evolved to helping leaders create high performing teams, because I figured out we can do all, I work in the agile space as well. We can have a high performing team that's doing work, but if the leader is not a servant leader, that high performing team will die. And we see this, it's agency, it's autonomy, it's mastery of that team that servant leader has to be about. They've got to be there to get the obstacles out of the way of the team. They've got to believe in the team. And a lot of leaders, the industrial age did not teach that form of management. And a lot of our organizations still have an industrial age mindset when it comes to management.
So are you saying the leadership has to hold the commitment for the team?
They have to help. The team commits, and it's not individual. So in order to shift from individual commitment to team commitment, which most organizations have some form of team structure now, we've got to get away from the individual to the group, right, to the team. And I mean specifically 9 or less, because nine or above, it's not a team anymore, it's a group. And you have to identify with that group of individuals, and then you're a team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So given this idea of groups and teams, right, and the distinction, would you say, I can guess the answer is yes, would you say that self-mastery for a team member is essential for it to move forward?
Yes. We've got to have a level of awareness across the team, right? If you have somebody that is not aware on the team, that will blow up that team. That team will be dysfunctional. And that one person on the team can make the rest of the team dysfunctional. It's the one rotten apple spoils the bunch.
That puts them in relationship at risk. If there's one who hasn't mastered themselves first, then the relationship of everyone within that team is at risk. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So, there are some people that should not be on a team. They're not mature enough to be on a team. Right. I mean, in college now, we do a lot of team group projects. And so many college students that I've worked with, they get so frustrated because there's somebody that's not showing up to the meetings, not doing what they commit to. And there's one person that wants to get a good grade, and they will do all the work. And that other person will let them. Right? So that team dynamic is broken. So this is what frustrates me with academics is, we're going to do team group projects, but they don't teach people how to be part of a group, how to be part of a team. And they give a group score.
Thank you so much for that comment. We're going to have a short break and thank our sponsors.
Let's give a shout out to our sponsor. Thank you, We Are Storically, for making this show possible.
We're back and we're talking with our guest, Frank Forte, about teams and self-mastery and how essential it is for each of us to master ourselves first before we can commit and contribute to the groups and the teams that we're on. And it makes me think about what's happening in the world right now. Are we all committed to the same thing? Have we mastered ourselves first so that we can, as a world, move forward? I'm not so sure, but it seems to me like Frank has the keys and the understanding to how self-mastery will improve ourselves and the world around us. Wendy, what kind of question do you have for Frank?
Well, I have a burning question, since we don't have that much time left, about you said earlier about bringing in validation from within instead of outside yourself. And this is very important for being able to act in teams and act for the better of the world. So what can you say about that, Frank?
I think we complicate it way too much, and we think we need big things for it. In reality, the dopamine hit will happen if we just do something we feel good about. So for me, it's getting up and exercising in the morning. So I go ride my bike. I feel good about that. It's my routine that gives me that steady state of dopamine hits. So and this is, going back a little bit, Dawn, I was listening to a child psychologist recently on the radio, and about, and this is his words, his his daughter would get up and do all of her homework, stay on her Zoom sessions all day. His son would, spend 15 minutes on Zoom, online training, go out and kick the soccer ball around for 15 minutes, and then play video games the rest of the day. So, we have two different views of what good looks like in that scenario. And we've got to create something that challenges us, because I'll go back to session 16 when you said something about we're growing. In nature, we're either growing or dying. There's no stasis.
Yes.
Right. So if we're playing video games 15 hours a day, we're dying.
That's a good point. Or what is growing, right? Like if you're not physically dying, right? And young kids, right? There would be a question about whether they're dying. The question is, what is dying and what is growing? So I would say what's dying is their ability to interact with human beings, because they're no longer experiencing social bonding, right? The hormones associated with social bonding, the ability to read facial expressions, those skills, which we know lead to successful outcomes as adults, are not being developed. So there is something that's dying, and what is growing? Their ability to move their thumbs, right? And their visual cues and their mental ability to see slight changes in those visual cues is expanding. And I don't know that they're doing any studies on how children's brains are changing, shifting dramatically because of the kinds of information that they're processing. So yes, something's dying for sure, and something else is growing. That's a very good point.
I mean, even having to do this, I've gotten to meet face to face with Wendy. The science says that in order to have rapport, you can only have it with one person at a time, and you've got to be within about 3 feet, because our biospheres actually interact with one another.
Right.
So
that's live by heart.
That. Just think about that in our current state. Well, we've got to be 6 feet away. We can't see each other smile.
Yes.
This is like really challenging for us. And we've got to almost double down on making a connection however we can.
That's very true. We are being separated in many different ways. We're being separated physically. We're being separated, right, facially and facial recognition. We're being separated psychologically with all the news and right what's happening in the world. And what will it take for us to make it back together? I think what we're hearing from you is that self-mastery is key. That when we have self-mastery, that allows us to overcome any external situation that that might erode who we are, who we believe ourselves to be.
Yeah, we always have the primary choice is fear or faith. We can choose to live in fear or be in fear, or we can choose to have faith.
Will you talk a little bit more about having faith?
There's always one more thing you can do. That is kind of what you learned on the submarine, right? Is when things are going really, really bad, there's always one more thing you can do as long as you had breath. As long as you had life, you need to keep fighting. It's literally, you fight till your dying breath. And I don't think we have that mentality right now. We need to fight for what we believe in, which is community, which is love, which is connectedness, which is living from your heart, which is connecting with source energy. It's all those things that we've talked about.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. In our last 2 minutes, what are some closing thoughts? I mean, right there, that was powerful. Right? Doing one more thing, reconnecting. That was a very powerful statement. Have you got one just as motivating to leave us with?
It's just about self-care. In this time, figure out what self-care means to you. For me, I use Headspace. It's an app. I use that for meditation. I get out on my bike before it gets too hot here in North Carolina. I have a glass of wine in the evening. These are the things that I feel like help me stay grounded and connected, and spending a lot of time with my 7 grandchildren because they're fresh, they're young, they're innocent, and they're awesome.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Wendy, our co-host, and thank you, Frank Forte, our guest. And just to remind you, Frank is an executive coach and the author of the upcoming book, Agile Mindset Demystified. And we're excited about the release of your book, Frank. To our listeners, thank you so much for being here with us. And if this message spoke to you, please tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. For more information about how you can live by heart, please go to our website, livebyhearttoday.com. Like and follow this page. We air every Thursday at 4:44 Pacific time. And from our heart to yours, we're creating a better tomorrow because we live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of
Live by Heart Today!
Thank you for watching. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Storically, for making this show possible.